I think I'll stop here. We can talk. Feel free to ask question. Yes.
When you read your work, you read with a strong cadence, which is very attractive. When you were at the MFA program here in this country, did you start thinking about what in your language reflected the strengths of the Vietnamese language and culture in the new English language that you were writing?
When I started writing, people tell me that I sound Vietnamese. And I'm not sure what that means, except for there is a Vietnamese rhythm that I'm quite familiar with because that's inborn. That's my first tongue, my mother tongue. And it feels that rhythm has carried itself through the English version of the way I write and speak. But it's not a conscious thing. English is still a thing that is both familiar and not familiar with. So I have this detached feel to it at the same time, so I can sort of mold it and play with it. So in some way, my Vietnameseness, I guess, infused the English version.
You touched on a lot of things that I'm kind of working on in my dissertation.
Okay, you can quote me.
But primarily I talk a lot about this idea of Asians in this country being made up as model minorities. And you use that really well, talking about how kind of this new generation can go into Silicon Valley and become this model minority, while someone like your uncle can speak, had the accent, so while he had the qualifications to become some of that model minority, he couldn't. Could you talk a little bit about how you feel about being labeled a model minority, being that you kind of encompass the definition?
I think the term model minority is sort of on its way out, I think, because everyone has become a minority. I mean, who's a model minority in Hawaii, and in San Francisco, where there is no one over 50% anymore, every demographic is under 50%, even the term minority is up for suspect. So I find that term useless, frankly. And I find, though, that sometimes I'm used as a token because, he's Vietnamese, so that sort of fill a diversity quota, and sometimes that pisses me off because they don't look at me as an individual with certain talent and certain skill, but like, he can do this, so let's just put him in that. I think there is another term that is useful, though, that hasn't been used, which is minority groups, like certain ethnic enclaves that can be studied. For instance, Vietnamese Americans now look at the Jewish American communities, model communities, and the Cuban communities as something that they could assimilate or try to copy. Because why? Because these communities who come to the United States earlier and managed to have lobbying power, managed to have political powers, and managed to have economic powers, which give them a voice beyond the street level protest. And so those model communities, at least from the perspective of other communities, is that, man, we wish we could do that like the Cuban did, could shift the vote in Florida or, that sort of thing. Regardless of where your politics lie, it's very interesting to watch. Yeah.
The term hyphenated, which you edited out in your public reading.
Oh, you're sharp.
Has that caused suspect condition?
Yeah, I think I have to keep it because that's how I felt at the time when I wrote the piece. But I find hyphenated identity is also useless. Because in the age of globalization, being Vietnamese and American is not enough. I saw a very fascinating cartoon. I couldn't tell if it's New Yorker or not. There's two women at the bar, love that. And they're like talking about their boyfriends, and one say, Bob really opened up to me. And the other one say, how so? And she say, well, he showed me all the bookmarks on his laptop. And I thought, that's who we've become. We have so many multiple sphere of interest. So to say I'm Vietnamese and American really is a lie, because it's a half lie. It's like I'm interested in Japanese culture, in manga. I'm interested in Hong Kong movies. I'm fascinated with French culture because I actually spoke French before I spoke English. So all these things do not fit into the hyphenated thing. And increasingly, we live in a very diverse, very multiple, complex, many bridges society, so that this idea that you're just this and that is not even good enough. In fact, you have these multiple connections, and if you want to deal with identity as open and as honest, it's the hyphenated identity goes the wayside the way the model minority is. Yeah.
I think one of my students remarked, one of my Vietnamese American students, one of my hyphenated students, self-hyphenated,
Yeah.
said, our parents are living in the past and we're living in the future. I like that.
In some way, that's true, and in general, that's true. I mean, there's a few people who actually very much up to par and rather deal with the reality as is. But a lot of Vietnamese parents who have lost so much and are still defining themselves as people living in exile can't move on, and so for them, the war. Vietnam is still a defining moment of who they are. And then the children who embrace American life and there's no more American making institute than the American schools, hey, dude, what's up? That kind of thing. And so you have a very big gap going between the parents who may or may not tell their stories to their children, and when they do, it's in Vietnamese, and it's and then the children who grow up and wanting a larger world are, having very different passion. And in fact, the question for the Vietnamese community to come is, how do you define our community when the older generation disappear and that extraterritorial passion dissipates? What will define a community that may not care as much about the future of Vietnam as their own future in America? And how they define that, what story would they tell themselves so that they can have a community still by the third generation? That is something that I think should be asked in any community that's new. Yeah.
My question is,